Hi guys, I hope everyone's doing well. I decided to tackle doing the 10 art styles challenge the last few days, and it was a bit harder to do than I originally anticipated just because I feel like the thing with most art challenges and some of the ones that I've done on here, they're not particularly a struggle for me. Like, I did the 10 minutes, 1 minute, 10 seconds challenge a while ago, and that's just drawing really fast, and I kind of draw fast anyway. Or challenges like we just got out of October, it's like draw one thing a day for a month, and that's not too difficult for me either since I already draw every day. And things like limited color palettes, like that's just a thing that you can do versus 10 art styles is draw very differently than you normally would and do it a lot of times, and also you're supposed to do it kind of correctly. Like there is a correct way to do it in that it is supposed to emulate something else. Which is not to say that other art challenges aren't difficult, just for me personally, they're not that different than my usual workflow. So for the art styles I picked, I did kind of try to go with a theme just to make the whole thing a bit more cohesive. So I aimed it as like childhood things that inspired me to draw. And for the character I picked my old OC Ruby. She has been around since I was like 5 or something, so she's really old. One of my oldest OCs that is still actually kind of relevant. I did do a quick design before I started recording just as prep because I hadn't drawn her in a while. Maybe I'll get around to giving her a proper redesign later, but for now I just threw her in an outfit and called it a day. Except not really, because then I drew her 9 more times. So the first drawing was pretty easy to do because it was just my style. Because yeah, sometimes when I draw it once and it's good, and other times I have to redraw everything like 5 times, and this kind of fell into the second category, which is kind of dumb, but it is what it is. I did wind up shading a little bit differently than I usually do, but I kind of just don't have a consistent method really, so hopefully that's not too far off from what is considered my normal style. I did at least get to play with some lighting at the end because that's kind of been my whole thing lately is that I like to just play with lighting. So I got to do that with the fire, so that's nice. So yeah, Ruby was one of my original characters in the story formerly known as The Power Game because we were very good at coming up with names as kids. And she was part of a story that I shared with my brother and my cousin. I'm not gonna like go into super duper detail, I guess, but she's got fire magic because well, that's a surprise secret for later. So I do wind up drawing her with fire a lot. She's an alien. She's a Zitan, which are like people except they have magic and they're in space because space is cool AF. So Ruby is one of a type of people known as the gems, which are supposed to be the guardians of their element essentially. So she is the gem of fire, and that means she's extra special Mary Sue. Actually, she's not anymore. I've edited her enough that I think she's safe now. But you know, when I was like 5, definite Mary Sue. I still love her anyway. I feel like she takes on a kind of strong protagonisty kind of vibe, which I guess is maybe something that I don't do with my characters so much anymore. So that's kind of interesting because, I mean, I guess she's got more of that like typical protagonist kind of feel to her. And that's as opposed to characters now where I definitely make the edgier protagonists and the more depressed protagonists. And so just looking at her, and she's usually pretty happy despite her crappy life circumstances, it just feels a little bit different. And I think that's about it for this first art style, so we'll transition into the second one. Yeah, and so the next art style I did was Pokemon. I started playing the games around Gen 4. My brother gave me his copy of Pearl after his friend gave him Platinum. I think I did play Yellow before that. I might be getting my timeline mixed up. Maybe I played Yellow after, but I did play Yellow. So I have played the older games too. But this is mostly where I started. We had been watching the show for like basically ever, but we didn't really get into the games until 4th gen. I did draw a lot of Pokemon as a kid, because, like, what kid Pokemon fan didn't draw Pokemon all the time? I did wind up using specifically the older art styles from Gen 4 and 5. I did notice afterwards when me and my brother were looking up some Pokemon stuff that the newer one is a lot more polished, which I guess is like a really obvious thing because, it would get better with time, obviously. But I didn't really realize just how much. So yeah, Ruby is a Pokemon trainer. She'd probably use a lot of fire types. I know that's a big surprise. I could see her using dragon types too, actually, because I feel like she wants some strong Pokemon. She's like that. She's got that energy to her. For the outfit, I got to mostly keep it pretty similar to the first one I drew her in, actually. You'll see in more of these later that I do kind of mix it up with the outfits, but this one's pretty close to her first one. This also was the first, well, this is the first art style I did that's not mine, so obviously it's the first for a lot of things, but it did make me notice how a lot of the art styles that I'm going to go into here have just like really tall eyes. I guess I'm just used to drawing like wider eyes. And that's a fun thing about drawing other art styles is that you can like figure out which parts of your art style are kind of like less common because if you're just drawing in your art style all the time, like of course everything you do seems like really obvious to you, but when you try out different things, then you can see how difference between the choices you would make and other artists would make. For the colors, I mostly feel like a bit on the duller side. It's like a lot of colors that would be considered bright colors, but they're a little bit muted instead of pushing the saturation all the way up. Yeah, since this is a Sinnoh drawing, I can just throw out the fact that I want Sinnoh remakes really bad. I would like to be playing Sinnoh remakes right now. So my one concern with the Sinnoh remakes though is I hope that they don't take out all the extra content. Like I really loved the Poketch and I loved doing contests and making poffins and all that stuff, so they better keep those in. And yeah, for the shading, I guess they did have a bit of a more painterly shading style, so I tried to emulate that the best I could. And the thinner line art as well, because I feel like I default to thicker line art usually. I don't usually think of it as that thick, but then when I see other art styles and how thin their lines are, I kind of realized I don't mind thinner line art really. I just when I'm drawing, I prefer it thicker. Like it's fine to like make it thinner at the end, but I don't like drawing with thin line art really. And yeah, I guess that's about it for this Pokemon one. Alright, and then, so for our third art style, I decided to pick Dragon Quest IX. Now, this game holds a special place in my heart because I kind of consider it like my first game, which I guess isn't really the case because I did play Pokemon before I played Dragon Quest. But I guess it was the first very story heavy game that I played, and I also played it by myself. Like for Pokemon, I did have to get help from my brother. But a lot of games I played before that were more along the lines of the like adopt cats and clean up cat poop and fashion designer and those kind of games. So playing a story driven RPG like Dragon Quest really was amazing for me at the time. So I wound up just drawing her as the protagonist in the protagonist's outfit. And the reason for that is because I did use Ruby as my character in the game. That's why she has that hair too, because she had that hairstyle back in the day. I kept her in the default outfit too, just because I'm pretty sure I just left her as the default class for the whole game instead of actually changing her class, which is a very weird decision, but also very in character for me as a kid. I feel like I can see that being the case. We did both somehow wind up losing our copies of Dragon Quest very long ago. I think my copy has been missing for probably like god 10 years now. So I would really really like to play the game again sometime. Maybe I'll buy it for myself, but I would also like to try out playing the other class systems because that game did have a good class system. I just didn't get to personally experience it. But yeah, I did really like this game because of the character customization and the story is just good, and I think I secretly like RPGs, I just haven't played enough of them. But yeah, so in terms of the art style, I did notice that he doesn't really use much line variation and has very soft shading, and I thought that was interesting because that's usually the kinds of things where on like art tips for beginners, like have some line variation and don't just shade with the airbrush. And that's exactly what he does, but his art style is so nice that he can just get away with it, and it's fine. I guess it's like a case of like as long as you like know the rules, you can break them, I guess. But yeah, I did draw a lot of Dragon Quest actually, because I thought the monsters had really fun designs. Also, like, who doesn't want to like draw a little teeny sanguini or a cruel cumber? Perfect enemy names too, as well as the designs. But yeah, I really did like the character customization, as I said, because also you could customize your teammates as well. So I was able to like add some characters to her story that way. They didn't really continue to be relevant, but maybe I'll bring them back sometime because you know what? I can do what I want. So yeah, I guess this wasn't too difficult of a style to replicate compared to some of the other ones. It does have a lot of detail in it though, and that's a bit harder to do with the thicker and solid brush because you have like less space to work with, but I think it worked out pretty well in the end. But yeah, I also really liked the game because I liked a lot of the characters in it. Like Stella was my best friend for life, and also you got to like drive a flying train around. Who doesn't want to do that? And I remember going into like the treasure mappy dungeons all the time and just like beating the crap out of the metal slimes to get that sweet, sweet experience. When I was saying earlier that story heavy, as most RPGs are, but the story actually made me feel emotions as a child. I'm still mad that I had to face betrayal when I was like 9. But that's okay, it's a good game. Alright, and then for this next one, I did the Winx Club. Winx Club, we're gonna pretend that Ruby was not just a Bloom ripoff, even though... So, yeah, Bloom was definitely a big inspiration for Ruby. I used to play as a different character in this game who was more like earthy magic, like flowers and such, and then I decided instead that I was going to have a character with fire magic. I wonder where that could have come from. But yeah, I guess part of the reason why I probably got into Winx Club was because it had similar vibes to the aforementioned Power game, because, you know, it's got like the other dimensions kind of like mirrored the Power games like other planets, and it kind of had this blend of like, it's got like the fantasy but like the modern, and it's got just like all these kind of different feels to it. Yeah, so I was really into the Winx a lot as a kid, obviously, because that's how I got my inspiration for Ruby. But also I got into a big Winx Club phase again in middle school. Oh my god, Peanut, stop meowing! Okay, what was I talking about? Yeah, so I got into a big Winx Club phase again when I was in middle school, as evidenced by my secret Winx Club DeviantArt account that I talked about in a video that it never got uploaded, but will probably come out one day, so sorry if this is... I'm spoiling the surprise. Can you... Little boy, why are you meowing at me? Stop it. I'm busy. Anyway, so I did lots of Winx Club OCs and art of them, and they had their own story, and it was really badly written. And one thing, too, was as into the Winx as I was, I used like a few bases occasionally, as you do when you're a young DeviantArt artist, but I also really wanted to be able to draw the art style for myself. And as much as I studied it and referenced it, I just could not pull it off. It just did not work out for me. So I think if middle school me could see this drawing, she would be very proud of it. Like, I know it's not perfect, but it's leagues better than I was. And I think that just goes to show that even if you have an art style you want to emulate exactly, sometimes it can be helpful to just learn how to draw in general. Because now that I have more experience, I'm able to tackle different art styles a bit easier than I could if I did not have as much drawing experience as I do. But yeah, for her outfit, I just decided to stick her in the Magic Winx first transformation. Enchantex would be too hard and take forever. Not really. I mostly just pick Magic Winx instead of Enchantex because, again, it would just be faster, and I already have 1 million of these to draw. But yeah, I was basically able to give her an outfit just from memory because, again, since I was so into it in middle school and I designed so many OCs, I kind of know the fundamentals of what makes a Magic Winx design, so I kind of just tackled it pretty quickly. I did decide to do the colored line art too, a lot of the... You were so chatty. So a lot of the reference art that I looked up, half of it had black lines, and the other half was colored. I think it was just the difference between, like, in the show and the concept art. So I did decide to just do the colored line art to more match the concept art look, just to make it a little bit fancier. Know that she would be a fire fairy because fire is her power, but Bloom is already a fire fairy, so we just are gonna have a second fire fairy now. It's okay. That, or I suppose she could just fight Bloom for the spot. I was also able to throw just some sparkles on there at the end. That was very easy with an actual sparkle brush instead of having to like draw them by hand or something. So we appreciate technology sometimes. And I guess that's it for Winx Club. So moving on again to the next one. Alright, and then this next one I have is RuneScape. I've also been playing RuneScape forever, similarly to every other game that I've posted so far. I did consider maybe doing the concept art style, but in the end I decided to do like an in-game render of the old school style. We're gonna say that it's because it's 3D and that makes it harder, but the real reason is because I thought it would be funny. That's what motivates my artistic decisions sometimes. I did sometimes draw some RuneScape things as a kid, so I thought it kind of fit into the category. And I still play RuneScape. I played RuneScape while I was editing this video, so I'm still into it. I don't play it enough to be very far, but I play it sometimes. So originally what I was gonna do was I was gonna give her some dragon armor because she's super cool. And also it's his Harket which is the big smashy hammer weapon she's holding. Decided to give her that just because I think she deserves a big smashy weapon. She seems like she'd like that, so we give the girl what she wants. I did wind up switching the dragon armor though because I decided that that would be way too much red. So I kind of just made up some armor. I think I probably could have done a better job of it, but that's okay. Hindsight, right? So yeah, the shading was a little annoying in this to try and get it to work how I wanted it to. But it's trying to be 3D, so I think I did make it look 3D at least though. But yeah, my brother always played a bit more RuneScape than me, especially back when we only had one computer. So I do want to get into it more. I did start a while ago an Iron Man account, which for people who don't play RuneScape, that is an account where you like have to do everything yourself and you can't like trade with people or anything. So I did want to do the Iron Man account and then do all the quests in the game and do an art piece for each of the quests. And I did start doing that. I didn't wind up uploading a video for it yet. Maybe I will at some point. But I did do a few drawings of that. And currently they're doing an event called Trailblazers League where they basically just added a bunch of like gimmicky type things to the game, and it only lasts for the next 2 months, I believe. So part of the reason I got back into RuneScape again is to do that league because I am competitive with my brother. Neither of us are going to be the top players or anything, but we can at least beat each other, and that's what's important. So what I did for the shading was I just shaded it normally, and then I just shrunk it down a lot so it would pixelate it, and then I just blew it back up in order to get more of that old game kind of look. At least the hands on this one were pretty easy to draw compared to the other ones. And then I did the highlights about the same way as the shading. And I think that about sums it up for RuneScape. Alright, and then this next art style is the Kingdom Hearts art style because, again, Kingdom Hearts is something that I've been into forever and have done quite a bit of drawing of. And, of course, you know, made an occasional Kingdom Hearts OC here and there back when I was a kid. I really like Nomura's art style, and I think I did take a bit longer on this one than the other ones. And mostly the reason for that is I feel like I have, like, Nomura's art style is probably the closest to mine out of all the styles I did for this challenge. Nomura is just me, but better. So I guess I was a bit more picky about getting things right since it's more in my element. I think one of the most distinct parts about his style is the eyes, so I did work on those a lot. I think at one point I went back and redid the entire face, but we'll see that later. Also, with the Nomura art style, I occasionally just try to replicate it anyway, whereas well, I guess other than the Winx, most of these are a first for me. I don't usually try to directly copy art styles. But Nomura's I've done a few times. So that's probably another reason why I cared about getting it right, is because I already have some experience with it. I like, with Kingdom Hearts, how invested I am in it still. Because, again, it's something I've been into since. Or, well, I think Kingdom Hearts 2 was around when we got into it, since that was our first game. But things like Star Wars and the cursed Harry Potter were things that I was into as a kid, but I'm not as into anymore. So it's nice to have things like Kingdom Hearts that I still really like. And not just to show off how emotional I am as a person, but I do remember when Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, I was in the car with my brother after he started playing it because we were going to go get tacos, and I literally started crying at a stoplight just because I was so happy that the game was out. So, yeah, I do kind of like it still, if that proves it at all. This was also fun to do because looking up the references, I stumbled into like a conspiracy theory thread that was from before Kingdom Hearts 3 came out about like Xemnas' zippers, so that was interesting. A bit of a wild ride. So, getting back on track in terms of Ruby's design as a Kingdom Hearts character, I wound up giving her a Keyblade because she's special. She's a gem. She's a princess. She gets a Keyblade. She's very special, incredibly special. She kind of wound up looking a little bit like my Kingdom Hearts OC that I'm using for an RP that I'm in, which is kind of funny to me, but that's okay. We're just gonna pretend that that's not a thing. And yeah, so since the power game was me and my brother and my cousin, right? That means there's three main characters, and that kind of lends into the whole Kingdom Hearts trio thing. So I partially based her Keyblade on that, and I partially based it on a Jingle Jouster. And so you get an explanation for what that is. One of the things that we did as kids was we would take like wrapping paper tubes and decorate them and basically use them to joust each other, and they were called jingle jousters. So I wanted to incorporate that idea into her Keyblade because I feel like Kingdom Hearts is the like perfect place to have like a goofy colorful weapon, and I want my jingle jouster rep where I can get it. So yeah, I decided to do it like that instead of basing it on a location. So I kept the colors in there as the red and the blue and the darkish grayish purple because it's ruby and sapphire and onyx. So we gotta get their character colors in there. As much as I've replicated the Nomura style before, I don't feel like I've really done that with coloring. So the coloring was a new experience at least. I think I did have a bit more white in the design originally, but looking at most Kingdom Hearts characters, they have a bit more, they're like mostly dark tones and then like a few heavily saturated ones. So I wound up throwing a bit more of the black colors in there. Another thing that was a bit complicated with this one is I really struggle to draw sharp lines. So I don't know if I made it sharp enough. Like hair especially, my instinct is to just make it as flowy as possible. But that's not Nomura style, so I had to try and force it to be a bit spikier. I think it turned out okay in the end at least. Alright, so this next style I decided to do Neopets. My brother actually recommended this one to me. I feel like this one's a pretty common interest too between internet artists as kids. I feel like a lot of people who played Neopets just grew into art people. I guess it just really supported that kind of art behavior, especially with the art contests on the site. Never actually wound up doing this though. Anyway, at first I did consider doing her as a fairy because that is the humanist thing we have in Neopets. But the art style for the Neopets fairies is really similar to Winx Club, so I didn't want to do that again. I didn't want to feel like I was cheating and doing the same art style twice. And then I also realized that I'm not a coward, so I was going to draw her as one of the anthro-y comic looking ones because I'm not really, that's not really my strong suit. So I decided to go for that, just to challenge myself a little bit. For what kind of Neopet she was, I was thinking at first of doing like a Scorchio or a Drake or something because they're dragons and she's Ruby. But I decided to go with a Corbat because I played around with the idea as a kid of her having like a white bat as like her familiar. But that never really wound up happening. But I thought it was enough of a throwback to go ahead and use the Corbat. I thought she'd be cute. And then yeah, so I do kind of want to practice and get better at drawing more than just regular humans. So that was another reason why this was probably a good exercise. I was considering doing her as one of the magma-y pets at first, but I didn't think that would. I don't want to say like not as easy because I mean I guess it is a bit easier to do like the basic color, but I feel like it wouldn't look as distinctly Neopets if I did it that way. So I just decided to keep her as a normal pet, get in those just bright basic Neopet colors that I grew up with. It was nice to just do this cell shading after doing all the weird blendy stuff on the last one. It was a good break after Kingdom Hearts because that one took a lot out of me. And then I wound up just doing a lot of color picking because that just was very easy for this one since all the colors I needed were already right there. I feel like she also just looks very excited and that makes me happy. She's just very excited to be a Neopet, I guess. Alright, and then this next one I did forget to start recording until like I was halfway done with it. That might be something you need to get used to because I did that a few more times on the next one. I'm guessing it's probably just because I got pretty tired out by this point. But anyway, this is the art style of the Digimon anime because I grew up watching that as well as Pokemon. Again, this one was pretty simple. I might have even just overshaded it because they just have very minimal shading. It's a very simple style and I love it for that. Like, it looks good, but it doesn't take a lot out of you to draw. I don't really remember how much Digimon I drew as a kid, but I'm assuming there was some considering how much I liked the show. So I'm not entirely sure if it counts for the theme, but I decided it was close enough because it was a little hard to think of 10 things. And yeah, so I also decided to throw in some goggles, like any self respecting Digimon protagonist needs. I did maybe make the shoelaces a little too detailed compared to everything else, but I tried to at least make it a little bit better. So I think it turned out okay. I also just like the very simple outfit too that I gave her in this one. Because they've got kind of like the modern look going on, but still like protagonisty. And then boom, there's Digimon. Alright, and second to last one, we have Peachy Peachy Pitch, also known as Mermaid Melody. I guess I like to call this my first anime. Obviously, I watched like Pokemon and Digimon and stuff, and whatever my friends forced me to watch whenever they came over. But Peachy Peachy Pitch is the first anime where I said, this is an anime, and I'm going to watch it, instead of just being like, I'm going to watch cartoons. So this was also my introduction to Japanese magical girls, which I would then be very into as a genre for the next few years. I'm still into them, but I don't watch that many new ones. If anyone has any good like magical girl recommendations, like feel free to like hit me up, wink. So I wound up getting into Peachy Peachy Pitch because again I was in the Winx Club fandom on DeviantArt, and there was some overlap between people who liked Winx and people who liked Peachy Peachy Pitch because they're both magical girls. So that's why I started watching it. I also picked this one partly because they've got those like huge early 2000s shoujo anime eyes. And usually when I try to do that, it doesn't go well. So I kind of purposely picked it again to challenge myself because I'm like, how can I make this face look good? I did. I think it turned out pretty well, honestly, considering how much this is not usually something I'd be able to draw. So, for Ruby's design in this one, I of course took all the elements of a mermaid princess's outfit transformation. At first, I was going to make her an orange mermaid princess because I am biased towards them. I like the orange ones. But in the end, I decided to make her pink because, as I said earlier, she's got that protag energy, so she gets to be the main character. I did keep her hair like the pinkish red instead of making it blonde like Lucia's because I want her to still be recognizable as herself. And I think if I made her blonde, she wouldn't look like Ruby anymore. She gets to be special enough to be the pink one, but not special enough to just like have a different hair color than everyone else. This one also took me a long time to do because there was a lot of just refining the details. It's a lot of ruffles and everything. But yeah, I did have a lot of fun with the outfit design on this one. At first I did only give her one glove because she only had one glove in like most of the other drawings that I'd done so far. But then I decided I didn't like it, so I just threw another glove in there at the end. This drawing was also the point where I decided to actually look up how to select all of one color at once. So that made the coloring process, or the shading process, a bit faster compared to the other ones where I just kept having to individually select every instance of a color to change the shading. So yeah, I did wind up also color picking from Lucia's outfit, but I feel like the colors were just a little bit off in that picture, probably just from the blur or whatever. So I did go back and change the colors again. But yeah, Peachy Pitch, pretty cool. Also got me into listening to more anime music, as well as watching anime in general, but I really did love the soundtrack for this show, and it was all I listened to for a while. Which, granted, was a pretty common thing for me as a kid, was to just pick something and listen to it forever. But this was one of those things. Jammed out to the soundtrack while I was making this. Still a lot of bops on there. And the music was also important because thanks to the power of YouTube recommendations, it actually led me to our next art style, which is Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles. I didn't actually wind up watching it immediately after Peachy Pitch, but after listening to the Peachy Pitch soundtrack for a while, YouTube recommended me the Tsubasa soundtrack, and I said, what the heck is Tsubasa? So I looked it up and I said, that sounds interesting and fun. And guess what? I watched the anime and I said, that was interesting and fun, but that wasn't enough for me, so I decided to read the manga. Now, anyone who knows me knows that Tsubasa is the most important thing that has ever existed in this world. It is the best piece of literature. It is the best piece of media. I will lose my mind about Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles every day for the rest of my life, and I have been for many years. So I included that as my last art style for this video. I took a lot of inspiration from the art style, specifically of the manga splash pages. I specify the splash pages because I actually was looking again at the Tsubasa art style recently, and the splash pages are very different from the actual manga, but I'm actually into the actual manga now, so admittedly, I was gonna do Tsubasa twice, was my original plan for this video, and then I knew I would get in trouble if I did that, so I made myself only do it once. The anime itself also doesn't look exactly like the splash pages, but that's probably because that would take forever to do, because they're very detailed. But yeah, I did save it for last because I knew that would actually motivate me to finish the challenge if I knew that I got to draw Tsubasa at the end. So yeah, as I was saying, took a lot of inspiration from it. That mostly manifested in my art style in high school as having the token super duper duper long clamp limbs. I drew like that in high school. And I also try to always do the really dramatic posing and the very detailed outfits and that kind of thing. I remember I would just be chilling in my basement with my best friend and we would be having drawing parties and I would be pretending I was Clamp. That's how it was in high school. And it rocked. Kind of miss it. So yeah, similarly to Kingdom Hearts, I can see a lot of Tsubasa in my own art style today, even if my limbs have toned it down a bit since high school. And since Ruby is a princess and also this is a Clamp splash page, I just decided to give her very dramatic, detailed outfit with flowy fabrics, which I really need to learn how to draw flowy fabrics better because that is my jam. I think it's so pretty to have flowy fabrics everywhere, but I haven't learned how to draw them yet. So that's maybe next on my list of things to do. For the coloring, it was a bit harder to replicate because, again, same as Kingdom Hearts. As much as I copied Clamp's art, I didn't really copy their coloring. Also, I'm pretty sure they use markers for their coloring. Don't quote me on that, but it looks like Copic marker if you look at the drawing. Which I obviously was not doing. I was drawing this on my tablet. And the best way I found to make it look like marker was to actually go in there with the blender, which I know a lot of people say to not use like the default blender, but you go in there with the default blender and you make those little circular motions like you do with the marker, it kind of looks markery. So I went with that. I think it turned out pretty well. Honestly, I was kind of worried about the whole drawing looking enough like Clamp in general, because the whole time I was drawing it, I'm like, I don't know if this is good enough. I don't know if this is good enough. And all it took was at the end to add the highlights in there with the white brush, and that was it. That's what makes it Clamp, I guess, is just the white highlights. And yeah, so another thing they have with their art that I've noticed and I think is really cool is that they've got very wispy line art. If you look at their hair and you look at their fabrics, everything is just like so wispy and nice. Obviously, my line art isn't perfect, but. And at this point, I had already recorded 8 other art styles, 9 if you include my own, so I think I was getting a little worn out. But I feel like this was more about the learning process of the other art styles more than making the best thing that I had ever drawn. My point is, they got this really wispy line art, but then they also do some of their shadows with these solid black inks. So everything looks like really loose and really weighted at the same time, and I love that. I think that's very sexy. And yeah, so I guess that is my 10 art styles. Here they all are. If you like this video, like it so I know you like it. In the comment section, if anyone wants to let me know about their childhood interests, if any of you like any of this stuff, I feel like I'm pretty much still decently into all these. So I'd like to hear from you. Also, let me know which art style you like the best out of the ones that I did. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Bye!